We'll be talking about implementing gender responsive and inclusive projects as requested by Equal Access. This is for the BONDingan session. So first, I will discuss with you how to apply a gender lens in our work as NGO workers or development workers. So the takeaway here is men and women are socially conditioned to occupy different roles in society. They face different expectations and challenges, and these biases are often subtle or invisible, which cannot be seen by our naked eye. And sometimes, or most of the time, it's not intentional or malicious. Regardless of these facts, treating all people equally does not necessarily result in equal outcomes. So, in order to be fair, or in the spirit of fairness, our organization must be prepared to treat men and women differently, to remove barriers and to encourage inclusion, which is one of our topic in the discussion. So we can start this process by applying a gender lens in our activities. Here are some questions that I want to pose or raise to all of you. Is this only about girls and women? Why does it matter? Equality versus equity. What's the difference between the two? And then the gender lens checklist and consideration of culture, governance, and how do we see gender in terms of projects and programs, or how do we apply gender responsive projects and programs, and how we see outcomes and evaluations in terms of gender and inclusivity. So gender lens reporting, grant applications and reports, because in grant reporting and in grant application, gender lens is usually being asked or requested by donor agencies, and reporting on projects designed specifically to address gender and equality. So first, if we wear glasses, then we understand how difficult it is to see things clearly without them. So the road signs along the freeway or along the highway, the words in a book, the emails that we usually read on a computer screen or in your mobile phones, all the information is there. But without your glasses, it might as well be invisible to you. So if you don't wear glasses, then think what it's like to try to see underwater without goggles or a mask. Looking at the world without a gender lens can be a bit like swimming without goggles or reading without glasses. So we live in a world where the default settings, like in a computer, have been set by heteronormative men and for heteronormative men. So the default gender-related assumptions that underlie our thinking are likely to remain invisible or blurry or blurred. And therefore, they can mislead us, even without us realizing it, unless we bring them to attention, question them specifically, and look objectively at precisely what lies before us. It's not just men who have blurry vision when it comes to gender. Both men and women are socially conditioned to see things a certain way. So using a gender lens when analyzing, planning, and making decision means carefully and deliberately examining all the implications of our work as NGO workers or development workers or civil society workers in terms of gender. So how do we see gender-wise programs or projects? Is one that considers the different needs and circumstances of people of all genders within the target beneficiary group. Let's talk about the concept of gender first. So the concept of gender applies to both men and women. It refers to our different socially constructed roles, our behaviors, our activities, the way we relate, share resources, make decisions, plan for the future, and participate in our community. It is different from sex, which merely defines us in a biological and physiological way. So this definition is adapted from a definition by the Australian Women Donors Network. Now, is this only about girls and women? So this is the first question that I have raised earlier. In 2015, European Foundation Center reported grant making with a gender lens responds specifically to the question, when you talk about gender, do you mean just women? It says, no. We mean looking at the different issues arising out of our experiences of being women or men or those identifying differently. So effective gender analysis requires engaging with and assessing impacts for people from across the gender spectrum. Meaning to say, whether you are LGBTIQ or whatever are the other gender orientation you think you're affiliated with. So in diverse circumstances and with a wide range of other social characteristics. Now, unremarkably, it really equates to male bias. You are more likely need to deliberately examine your program's effects on and openness to other groups, including to women and girls. But as the largest population is excluded, and given its roots in the feminist movement, gender lens analysis tends to emphasize understanding policies and programs primarily in terms of their effects on females. But that should not be the case. So why does it matter? There are two excellent reasons why not-for-profits or non-government organizations should apply a gender lens to their work. First, doing so will mean your work is fairer, meaning because all potential beneficiaries are considered and included, and more effective because your activities will be better targeted, meaning you also target those who are more or the most vulnerable population. Second, not-for-profit or non-government organizations are and in what they do. In time, your funding might depend on getting it right. So, anti-discrimination efforts may begin with women, but should not end there. Women are not, of course, the only disadvantaged or marginalized group in our society. There are other also population or groups that are marginalized or disadvantaged. Organizations must also ask themselves whether there are barriers to participation affecting other groups such as indigenous people, people from non-English speaking backgrounds, people in poverty, LGBTQI people, for example, along similar lines like PWDs. So in what follows, our examples address the specific issues of women and girls. So imagine running a race between a cheetah, a leopard, and an elephant, a dog, and a beetle. All are in good health. The starter's gun fires, and they all take off at exactly the same time. They've all got an equal opportunity to win the race, right? No, clearly not. A report by Girls Incorporated titled What's Equal? Figuring Out What Works for Girls in Co-ed Settings in 1993 urges organizations to examine their work in terms of three factors: equality of access, equity of treatment, and equity of outcome. So the report says leveling the playing field is more than simply opening more doors for girls and giving equal treatment to girls and boys. It is transforming the way we look at gender as it relates to girls and boys' development. So, what does it really mean? In seeking to uncover structural biases, or shall we say structural conflict embedded within its work, a non-profit organization or an NGO, similar like what you are affiliated with, needs to take time for thoughtful reflection. What do you mean by equity of access? It means that the program provides women and girls equal opportunity with men and boys to participate in programs and activities. Programs will not necessarily achieve equity of access simply by opening the door to both genders. Similarly, opening up the running race to 5 different species, which I mentioned earlier, with different qualities is hardly a fair race, And that's not even taking into consideration the socially conditioned biases and differences that come into play when we're talking about humans instead of animals. So, I have been raising the gender lens checklist earlier. It is impossible to prescribe all the questions our organization should ask itself in order to gain a better appreciation of the gender implications of our work. However, you can use the following areas as a starting point and tailor the questions to your own circumstances and aims. Not all of the following questions have right and wrong answers. There may be very good reasons why your programs or your projects are not reaching women and girls in equal numbers. You may be running a men's health clinic, for example. In any case, it's still important that you ask the questions. So, what are these questions? In terms of culture, does your organization serve all genders by 1. Holding board meetings, retreats, staff meetings, etc. at times when women and men are able to participate fully? Why do I ask these questions? Because there are times that women are not available at certain times of the day. Maybe in the morning because they're trying to prepare for their family, or even the men also in other cases. Second, does your organization offer family-friendly benefits such as family leave, job sharing, family violence leave, and child care? Third question, does your organization have a training board and staff members to recognize and address discrimination, equity, and language bias regarding gender, race, age, disability, and sexual orientation? Do your policies adequately and appropriately address sexual harassment, domestic violence, discrimination, and protections for those expressing grievances? Fourth question, does your organization serve all genders by seeking appropriate gender-related expertise or collaborations? And last, fifth question, does your organization serve all genders by taking into account the way in which racial, ethnic, and cultural dynamics affect the interests and needs of specific groups of women and girls? So in terms of governance, what are the checklists or the questions that we must ask our organizations? One is, does your organization include women and girls as active decision makers by, first, ensuring that they are adequately represented in staff and board leadership positions? Second, does your organization include women and girls as active decision makers by encouraging their participation in strategic planning, program planning, staff development, and evaluation? Third, does your organization include women and girls as active decision makers by demonstrating a commitment to women and girls in both budgeting and expenditures? For example, do you provide equitable and appropriate compensation with the opportunity for professional growth? I hope all your answers are yes in all those questions. Let's focus on the projects and programs as it is our work. It involves our work. In its work in the community, does your organization consider gender equity when developing a program by, first, planning and implementing programs that encourage active participation, leadership, and non-traditional roles for women and girls? This is still debatable, of course, because what do you mean by non-traditional roles for women and girls? Second, accounting for the needs, interests, and experiences of women and girls in program activities from promotion and outreach to training materials and curriculum. Third, providing the support structures. Example, what are these? These are childcare, transport, domestic violence screening, counseling, required by women and girls to enroll and be successful within specific programs, linking effectively with organizations and services as necessary. Fourth, Supporting and preparing women and girls to maximize their current social and economic well-being. And fifth, encouraging women and girls to participate by providing support and feedback and requiring outcomes that are meaningful to women and girls. Six, using language in promotions, advertisements, and other published materials that will encourage or at least not discourage women and girls to participate. Seven, using images that depict all genders in appropriate ways. And eight, advertising and promoting your work in places that will ensure you reach all genders. Ninth, timing your activities to ensure that all genders are able to participate. What do you mean by this? If you hold meetings in the evening, does that limit participation by people with parenting responsibilities? If you hold meetings during the day, does that preclude people who work? So these are both considering if there are parenting responsibilities of participants in the meeting or those who have work. So holding your activities in locations also that are accessible to people of all genders. Are they safe, appealing, and welcoming to people of all genders? And then 11, catering for particular groups of people who need extra help in accessing or getting the most out of your program because they are starting from a lower or different base of knowledge or experience. 12. Providing a setting and an environment in which all genders feel comfortable voicing their opinions. So of course, the environment should have conducive for people to accommodate all their voices. And the last one is identifying any other possible barriers to participation by women or girls. Are there any barriers to men or boys participating too? How can they be minimized or eliminated? So these are questions or checklists that we may answer in order to ensure that our programs or project are gender responsive too. In terms of outcome and evaluation, do you expect different outcomes from your work for different genders or the same outcomes? If intervention X leads to outcome Y for men, is it the same or is it the same true for women? How will you evaluate the impact of your project or program on men and on women? How will you report on it? These are basic questions that we must take into consideration when we try to evaluate the outcome of our project. So gender lens reporting for grant applications and reports are really necessary, especially most of the funders are now looking for that gender factor. So as a grant seeker like us, you may encounter questions on application forms and progress reports or acquittals that ask you specifically about how you're applying a gender lens to your work. Here are some tips to help you answer those questions appropriately. So demonstrating you understand what a gender lens is and how you are applying it. You may be asked to demonstrate ways in which you have addressed the needs of people of different genders in the design and management of your initiative. So a checklist provides a good starting point in considering what you may need to do. But you will need to tailor your thinking to your specific program. All genders can usually be included equally if you employ creativity in your process and you bring to the surface hidden barriers to participation or inclusion, which cannot be avoided. So demonstrating you will monitor the results of your actions. How will you do that? You may be asked to show how you will measure or have measured the gender reach of your project or your program. The simplest way for you and your funders is to measure whether your organization's efforts have been successful, is to consider the gender split of the people who have accessed, delivered, or participated in or benefited from your initiative. You can also collect this information by conducting simple actions such as head counts, or including gender identification in your registration form or survey. However, you should take note that there may be a deliberate reason why you aren't aiming for equal gender reach. For instance, working with people who have a sex-specific illness or men's mental health, you need to be prepared to clearly articulate these reasons to your funder, demonstrating you have thought about what worked and what did not. Gender-wise funders appreciate information about what worked to create a project or program that has provided equal access regardless of gender. So the best funders also want to know about what did not work and why it did not work. You won't always have solid evidence, but if asked why you succeeded or failed to reach gender parity, you should make an attempt at identifying the influences. What are the factors that influence? It might include structural influences. For instance, the initiative was held in a place not favored by one gender or another. The language wasn't right. No childcare options were provided, etc., as well as the influence of unconscious bias. As humans, we are heavily biased towards things that are familiar to us and can be easily made to feel uncomfortable by things that feel out of whack. As our brains seek to get things back to rights, we can unknowingly create barriers to the unfamiliar. This is not unusual and it's usually not malicious, but it can affect whether or not we are being truly inclusive. Again, a good place to start in identifying barriers is the checklist that I mentioned earlier. But it's important to carefully scrutinize the design and management of every aspect of your program. So overcoming unconscious bias takes careful and creative thinking. So set aside time in any review to examine your activities carefully. Next one is demonstrating your commitment to continual improvement. Unless you've achieved gender equality in your project reach, your funder may want to know how you plan to address the imbalance in future projects. They may want you to identify potential changes to your program that would ensure your work reaches women and girls more equitably in the future. This information can be used to inform the design and implementation of your program next time, and by the funder to feed into similar projects that can learn from your experience. So how do we report on projects designed specifically to address gender inequality? There are guidelines that apply to all initiatives, regardless of their purpose. But some programs aim specifically to address gender inequality or do so as an unintentional addition. Reporting on these types of projects should be more in-depth and robust. We have to take note that there are many different ways of measuring girls' or women's empowerment as it is multidimensional. It's likely that organizations directly addressing gender inequality will have a good understanding of how to report the results. These tips are aimed at providing some examples for organizations looking for guidance when reporting on partial or unexpected outcomes that address gender inequality. We will need to devise a way to evaluate and measure how our project has addressed gender inequality. This may incorporate participants' views of their own empowerment rather than relying on an accepted norm or outcome. You can read more about evaluation methods in Measuring What Matters book. In reporting on the effects of your initiative in reducing gender inequality, you may look at the personal level, the higher self-esteem, the greater access to personal capital, and also to relational level. Example, the influence in the community, the ability to control time devoted to care responsibilities, or environmental aspects such as breaking stereotypes, quality of health, legal services. These levels and corresponding characteristics are outlined in detail in Oxfam's How to Guide to Measuring Women's Empowerment. You may want to outline the dimension in which your program is working in terms of the following aspect: economic, legal, psychological, etc. Your program may work specifically within one dimension or incorporate a number of dimensions. So these are further readings that I would like to share with you in order for you to understand how can your programs and project be more gender responsive and inclusive. So I hope this short talk provided you insights and additional knowledge in terms of gender responsive projects and inclusiveness. Thank you very much.